Confidence is like my favorite thing to talk about, honestly, because I realized that a lot of people don't have confidence and they have like a false sense of confidence. And actually, I'll tell you guys a story. My modeling digital sessions always end up being therapy sessions. And I think it's no coincidence why they end up being therapy sessions, because people are coming to get developed to be confident in front of the camera. But for me, it's like I know the real source of confidence, and it's not in how beautiful you think you are. It's really in your relationship with God. And so the other day I had someone that came in and I was talking to him. He came in very frantically, and I'm always really good at kind of like seeing people where they're at when they come into my apartment. And sometimes people are super frantic, and I am so good at like, hey, breathe and relax. You're in a safe space now. And so seeing his mind kind of like undo the anxiety that it came, because he came flustered because of like an argument that he came with his mom and whatnot. We were talking about basically comparison. Remember, I asked a friend of mine a long time ago, he gave me this compliment. He's like, Brandon, I wish I was more like you. He saw like my hustle, and this was like a couple of years ago. And even though he said that, and like you would think, oh, that's such a compliment, right? For me, I didn't see the compliment. I saw the defect in him saying that, because I kind of saw that he looked down on himself by saying that, right? And that was what I focused on, not on the compliment, because, you know, I don't need to get praise, but I was like, you know, I'm curious, Kaylin, what percentage out of the day do you spend comparing yourself to someone else? When he said 90%, I was marveled because I'm like, I wouldn't even say like 1% or anything above 0%. But I posted on my story and I asked people like, what percentage of the day do you spend comparing yourself to other people? And all the responses I got were like 80, 75%, 60, 50, like high percentages. And I'm like, no wonder this world is so broken. You're not focused on your own life and your own path, and your own purpose. You're focused on what someone else has, and you're focused on other people and other things. And when I discovered that, I realized like there is a huge problem with people and how they view themselves and how it's centered on comparison. Our culture is centered around comparison, and that damages your confidence, because if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, you have zero clue about what your story is, what your purpose is in life. And how could you love life if you don't even know what your life is supposed to be about? I want to talk about confidence because I want to really get down to the root of what confidence really is, the source of confidence. And in today's message, we're going to look kind of briefly a review of the first, second, and third book of John. And if you guys know anything about John, John is considered Jesus' best friend, his BFF. They call him John the Beloved because that was basically who Jesus was most close with. Well, I'm going to start with the question, okay? And the question is, what are you afraid of? Confidence comes down to fear and the fear that people have, right? But I want to unpack what fear is and how confidence comes from fear dying, essentially. But we're going to look at 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, where John writes, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever." 1 John chapter 2, 15 through 17. Okay, so basically the first three letters of John were written by the Apostle John, one of Jesus' closest disciples, near the end of his life, around 85 to 95 AD. At this time, the early Christian church was facing a crisis of faith. False teachers were spreading deception. Believers were struggling with doubts about their salvation, and many were uncertain about their identity in Christ. John's message in these letters is both corrective and encouraging. He writes with the confidence of someone who has walked with Jesus, right, because they were BFFs, and witnessed his resurrection, urging believers to hold fast to the truth and to live in assurance of their salvation, which honestly, it just dawned on me, like they witnessed his resurrection and there's like a purpose in that. An overview of 1 John. John emphasizes the importance of knowing with certainty that we are saved. He reassures believers that their eternal life is not based on emotions or performance, but on their faith in Christ. He warns against false teachings and encourages believers to walk in obedience and love, showing that true faith produces a transformed life. Some of the key themes in 1 John, and this is kind of what I want the focus of today's message to be on, but it's the assurance of salvation. And I want to ask you guys to just think and look at me for a second, but I want you to ask yourselves, do you guys know with 100% certainty that if you died today, you would go to heaven? You don't have to answer, but think about it. I want you guys to understand something, that the entire Bible is constructed with stories and stories of people with the sole purpose so that you can say with 100% certainty that when you die, you will go to heaven. And that if you have any doubt or insecurity, it is the basis in which your confidence in life will be shakable and basically breakable. And the point of today's message is understanding the foundation of where your confidence comes from, understanding the salvation you do have, and understanding that once you accept that truth, it's all up from there. Okay? But that's one of the themes that 1 John talks about. We can know that we have eternal life. 1 John chapter 5. The next theme is living in truth and love. True faith is reflected in how we live and love others. 1 John chapter 3. Perfect love removes fear, allowing believers to live boldly. 1 John chapter 4, 17 through 18. Okay, now the second letter of John, and I'm only going to do a review of the first two. Guarding against deception. In 2 John, John writes a short letter warning believers about false teachers who deny the truth of Jesus Christ. He emphasizes that staying faithful to sound doctrine is essential for confidence in salvation. He urges believers to reject anything that distorts the gospel, showing that true confidence comes from knowing and standing firm in the truth. Some key themes here are truth matters. Okay, have you guys ever heard of your truth, my truth, right? No, there's only one truth, and that's God's truth, and there's your lie. Faith must be rooted in the real Jesus, not in distorted ideas. 2 John chapter 1, 7 through 9. Love and obedience. True faith is displayed through love and obedience to God's commands. 2 John chapter 1, verses 6. Okay, so why this matters for kingdom confidence. So John's letters lay the foundation for true confidence, not in ourselves, but in God's promises. He teaches that when we know we have eternal life, we no longer seek validation from the world. This frees us from fear, doubt, and imposter syndrome, allowing us to walk boldly in our faith, careers, and callings. In these letters, John is stressing to the Christians the importance of understanding the certainty of their salvation, because there were people, and I think this is kind of like one of the key things that I pondered on when I was going over it today. John had a reason why he needed to write these encouraging letters to the church at that point. And the reason why he had to is because there were people in that time, right? Because this was post Jesus's crucifixion, resurrection. Christianity was exploding out of the Middle East, but there were people coming and causing doubt, right? Because that's what Satan does. He's like, I need to destabilize this movement that's exploding. And the way that I'm going to do that is by causing doubt, causing people to really believe, did the resurrection actually happen? Maybe they found a body. And if they found a body, because realistically, if you're a Christian, you know this, that our faith hinders on the resurrection, on the truth and veracity of the resurrection. If the resurrection didn't happen, if Jesus Christ did not die and raise from the dead, then we have no certainty in what we believe in. We have no assurance that we're going to heaven or that there is a God. But because that was occurring during that time, John had to exhort and encourage them and give them confidence in the truth of where their identity is rooted in. So there are people who he called antichrists who are actively trying to dissuade the believers from the foundation of their faith, which is their salvation. What is the foundation of our faith? Our salvation. If we don't have 100% certainty of our salvation, we don't have faith. And when I was going over this, I thought it was really interesting because if you look at our modern world today, there are many things that are trying to convince us out of believing this truth. Today, though, the enemy takes many different forms. And when you think about the things that influence us, you have to start wondering if their objective in the end is really just to get us to question, are you really going to heaven? And maybe not directly, but indirectly by causing you to believe that your salvation isn't good enough. How? By keeping us wanting more out of this world. More followers, more bookings, more ways to glow up, more money, more attention by girls or guys, and more success. All the enemy has to do is convince us that we don't have enough, and we do the rest of the work by believing that it's because we're not enough. The enemy only needs to plant a seed of doubt. We're the ones that destroy ourselves in the end. Why? Because we rely too much on our own knowledge and not on God's knowledge. We lean on our understanding and not on God's understanding. When we give our attention and desires to the things of the world, we lose sight of the biggest assets we as believers have, which is our salvation. And when we lose sight of that, we can never build real confidence. It all just becomes a fake imitation. In an industry like modeling, where confidence is often tied to external approval, John's message is a reminder that our identity and value are already secure in Christ. When we know our value, rather than hoping to be valued, We live and work with unshakable confidence. And how this actually translates into an industry like modeling or acting or influencing is we're no longer chasing success or excellence for the same reason the world chases these things. For me, for an example, like my business has grown and I've become more successful over the span of 4 years, and it's been crazy to see, and it's been an absolute blessing. But I could give it all up because I could care less, right? Obviously, it's great having money because I went through my 20s being broke, and that wasn't fun. Ultimately, I'm not doing it for acceptance or for the attention or for all this stuff, right? And I think that's the fun part because, from my perspective, getting to where I'm at was never because I asked for any of this. Like, basically, you all kind of forced me back into this world, and everything that I'm doing is because it's all your fault because you all like pulled me back into this. And it's funny though, but what's cool is that when you're in a position, especially when you're leveraging a deal in negotiations and you have nothing to lose, who do you think has the most power in that negotiation? You do, because I have nothing to lose. What are you going to take away, right? The enemy should never have a card to pull on us because they spot a weakness in us because we have something planted in the world, because it could be your followers, right? I'll give you an example. A lot of young kids have gotten hacked on social media. Some hacker comes in, steals your Instagram password, ransoms it back at you, and you have to pay this much money to get it back, right? Sadly, and I think this happened sometime last year, I think like a 14 or 16-year-old high school boy committed suicide because he was basically sending inappropriate text messages to a person on Instagram. He thought it was a girl, and it ended up being a hacker who swindled him into doing that, and then threatened to send his pictures to his friends and family, selling basically, give me money or I'll send this to everybody and destroy your life. And this boy killed himself as a result. End his life, destroyed his family, all that. But that's just one example of how the enemy uses our weakness against us, because the enemy has leveraging power over us. Why? Because we've given a footing to this world. I think the coolest thing about God giving me the ability to do what I'm doing is that I'm owned by nobody. Right? I'm not owned by agencies. So even like my content is very unbiased because I'm not doing it for agency approval. I'm not a model, so I'm not biased because I've been a model and this is my experience. No brand pays me. I'm owned by no one. I am completely independent, and that allows me to be unfiltered and speak the truth and say things that others, and I've sat with these agents, by the way, and I say things that they wish that they could say to people, but they can't because they'll get in trouble because they have a boss and they have shareholders or a board, and they have to go through a lot of, levels to get things approved. I don't, right? But the point is that when you're in a position where you have no interest in this world, you can do things from a totally different perspective than the rest of the world, right? Because then you could do modeling, music, building a business without caring about the result. You're doing it because you love doing it. That's why I do what I do, because I'm good at doing it. And the money that I'm making, that's not as a result of my interest of making money. It's as a result of being someone that believes in God, because my love for God means that I'm going to be excellent in everything that I do, because I want to give people a 5-star service. I want people to enter into my premises and get a service that proves that there's a God behind me, because having God in my life has given me that hard work ethic to offer a product that's effective, right? It's tied into my faith, right? But going into how that translates into your lives as Christians and what confidence looks like. Well, number one, it starts with you understanding when I die, I'm going to heaven. And what does that lead to someone to be? Fearless. I think it's so crazy because if you really think about someone who genuinely believes that they're going to heaven when they die, how would they live life? They would not be afraid to do anything. And I think the coolest thing about owning a business and doing what we're all doing in the industry is that it's all based on risk. But you can't take a risk if fear is blocking you. But the whole point of the Bible is God saying, what are you afraid of? When you die, you're going to go to heaven. What is the one thing that man is most afraid of? Death, right? But God said, why do you think I rose from the dead in front of you guys? I rose from the dead to show you that I conquered death. I'm the conqueror of death, and yet you're still afraid of dying? Like, if you imagine a person who really truly believes that when they die, they will go to heaven. And we have examples of that. And, one of the examples that you might be familiar with, his name is Paul the Apostle. That man, he saw heaven in a dream, right? Or actually, we don't know if it was a dream or he didn't even know what it was, right? But he saw heaven. He saw what it looked like. And that assurance allowed him to do all of the crazy things that he did during his time of following God and the calling that God gave him, right? So number one, it starts with accepting and believing that you are saved. And let me remind you guys, what that looks like is literally repenting of your sins, giving your life to Jesus, having that prayer, talking to God and say, yo, God, I want to make sure I'm good with you. I know that I say it and I know that I want it, but I don't want to lock that in pen and ink. I want to make sure that it's secured. God, I want to give you my life. I want you to be in control of me because I'm done controlling myself, because when I'm trying to control the world, nothing ever happens the way that I want. I want to relent control and give it up to you, right? That's the first step, is giving control over your life to God. Next step is building that relationship with God so that you have knowledge, right? Because step one is the action. But the reason why it's important to have Bible studies to get to know God is because you have to have knowledge of things like understanding what love is and understanding how to love others. Because realistically, a part of having a fearlessness and confidence is loving. A lot of what I feel like I'm able to do comes from a place of love, and that's what first book of John is all about, is understanding love, because he says that perfect love casts out all fear. So there is a connection between being fearless and confident and having perfect love. But having perfect love comes from only knowing the source of love. And who is the source of love? God. He even says God is love, right? So you can always love in anything that you ever see and replace it with God, and it will mean the same thing, because God is love. He literally equates himself to love. Another name of God is love, right? So God is love. And so we have to move in love. And what that looks like when we're walking in the industry is our ability to know people, our ability to walk into an interview because you're trying to get signed to a modeling agency, and sitting with this agent who is interviewing you and being able to actually look at them, not from the perspective of what you're trying to get out of it, but what you're offering to them. And I think that's the other cool thing that I appreciate from my experience in life, is that there's a difference between knowing you're valued and hoping to be valued. Start looking at the world around you, your friends and yourself, and ask yourselves, are you aware of your value, or are you hoping to be valued? Because those types of people live a completely different lifestyle. You look at my life and I think you could clearly see I know I'm valuable, right? But if I was a person who was hoping to be valued, what would that look like? It would look like probably trying to get viral on TikTok and social media. It probably look like trying to make a lot of money. So I'm going to take advantage of these opportunities and maybe consequently affect a relationship that I have. It's going to look like when I meet a modeling agent to get signed, it's going to be looking like overselling myself because I'm desperate to be signed. It's going to look like doing weird things in the business to get ahead, because there's a lot of people, a lot of models, a lot of stories you'll hear about them doing things inappropriate in order for them to get further in their career, and they'll get that, right? For instance, in the situation with the meeting, they're hoping to get the approval of that agency, or the photographer, casting director, that something crazy is going on between them, is because they're hoping to get that campaign. They're hoping to get that editorial because they're hoping that by getting booked for that campaign, it's going to push them in their careers and it's going to give them that validation and that value, right? There's a whole difference in movement. We move differently as Christians when we understand our value in comparison to those who are hoping to be valued. So I think that's one of the things that's cool. But essentially, the confidence that people desire and that they want, I want to be able to talk people and look them in their eye, for instance, right? Which is so funny because that's actually like a exercise that I do when I do modeling digitals, because a lot of people will come to me and they can't look me in the eye and they're looking around and stuff. It'll be kids that'll do it. It'll be adults that do it. And one person recently, I literally forced them to stare at me in my eyes for 30 seconds before we even started digitals. I was like, you're going to stare at me for 30 seconds. And I put the timer on and everything. And every time he looked away, we started over. I'm like, nope, start it over. Nope. Hold, lock, right? But it's funny because you move differently. And that is what our life is supposed to look like as believers. And this is what I'm teaching my models right now that I'm managing. They're on a 30-day video selfie challenge. For 30 days, they've been posting on their Instagram stories. They're talking on camera. Yesterday, I told them, okay, you guys are going to post ugly selfies because I want you guys to, number one, get over the fear of what people think of you. But number two, I want you guys to show the world that you don't take yourselves that seriously, because they're good-looking dudes, right? They've been listening to every step of the things that I've been having them do throughout this challenge. One of them is tell a cool story, do a full body fit check, right? They're always having to talk on camera. And then I taught them okay, post a thirst trap, be aware of your good angles and stuff, right? Different exercises to push them out of their comfort zone. One of them, Joel, he's outgoing. And the other one, Sebastian, he's more introverted, okay? They've both reported different experiences as a result of doing this from their environment. And I already knew, I'm curious, tell me, what are your friends and your people saying about you doing this, right? For Joel, because he has this personality, being outgoing and being very comfortable in his skin, he has confidence. A lot of his friends are praising him and basically supporting it because they expect this of him. Sebastian, on the other hand, being introverted and also being an incredibly good looking kid, he's reported to me that people have like made fun of him. People have been negative to him. People have like insulted him, of his own friends, right? And I was like, huh, that's so interesting because I didn't expect that, right? And that's because I relate with Joel's experience because I've always been outgoing. So when you meet me in person, you pretty much can expect that from me over social media. But with Sebastian, I realized that someone like him, who is good looking, has probably been seen by the friends in his life as less of a threat because he's not this outgoing and good looking person. He's just good looking, but he was never aware of his power because once he started posting himself on social media and he became confident and he became this person who became on their radar and put himself out there, then they became aware of his threat because now he's not only this good looking dude, but now he's this good looking dude that's aware of his own power. And so what I realized in even doing this exercise and why I put this exercise onto models and even in my model coaching program that I'm doing, it's not a plug, people are drawn to those who are fearless. Why? Because they're afraid. They're fearful. We as Christians are the ones who the world should be drawn to because we should be the ones who are the most fearless in every area, in every industry. We are the ones who should be the definition of confidence because we know where we're going to go when we die and we have an assured salvation. So today I want to remind you guys that if you aspire to be confident and fearless, and it's not about being extroverted or introverted, it's about understanding your value. It starts with understanding when you die, you will go to heaven if you put your faith in Jesus Christ. And the minute you accept that, and you have to remind yourself of that, because trust me, Satan is going to do everything he can to convince you out of that. He's going to cause doubt like he did with Eve in the garden. Did God say you were saved? Because that's what Satan does. He sows in doubt. But the minute you accept that truth, you're going to actually start seeing confidence pour out from your life because the result will be fearlessness. You have nothing to fear. The next step that happens, or the result of that mindset, is you're going to live a life of taking risks. Because what are you going to be afraid of now? You know, you're going to take the risks. You're going to try the things. You know, you're not going to let the doubt and the uncertainties and the anxieties of life talk you out of trying to rebuild your business after losing it, or retrying to submit if every agency rejected you, or trying a different path. You know, because there's always going to be a reason to doubt ourselves and to make us feel like we're not enough. But that's the point. God's saying, yeah, that's what happens when you are still on this planet, on this earth, but you are enough because guess what? You do have the certainty of. You may not know when you're going to get your next paycheck. You may not know when you're going to eat again. You may not know when the next big opportunity for your career is going to come, but you do know that when you die, you're going to heaven. And so at the very least, we should live a hopeful life full of confidence. And that's what I wanted to talk about today because it translates into your career and it translates into everything that you do. And I feel like it's happened to me. And I feel like that's the reason, if I could give you guys evidence of what that looks like in someone's life, look at my life. And I'm not perfectly confident. You know, I have insecurities. I know my value. And I think that's the most freeing and liberating and fun thing. And knowing my value makes my life so fun. My life is fun. Like, my life is not boring, you guys. I'm tired all the time. It's so fun. But yeah, so I want to now jump into discussion questions and get you guys involved in this. The first question that I want to pose to you guys: how does the way you live reflect whether you truly believe that your identity in Christ is unshakable?
Self-affirmation of, oh, and that could lead to pride, saying, like, you know, it was a trend back then to be like, I'm a bad, you know what, you know? And I fell into that trap of telling myself that constantly to make me feel better about myself, but that led me nowhere. And so, yeah, just standing firm on God's truth of who he says you are, I think makes it unshakable.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of that, I would say undermining yourself or accepting any situation that doesn't accept your value when you know your own worth. I would say always standing firm in who you believe you are and not changing for anybody else.
Or how about not in who you believe you are, but how about who God says you are?
Yes.
Yeah, love that.
You have to make miracles out of your life, like you have to do the impossible almost, because then when people are like, how did you do that? It kind of gives proof that God exists. So you have to kind of, like you were saying, be fearless in order to actually be the physicality of the Holy Spirit and let him like show through your life. And like people are like, oh, how did you do that? Like, that's so cool that you're, you know, hosting this, or that you're famous on TikTok, and you can always give credit to God, and then people would be like, oh, maybe he is real.
when we look at the world and we look at people who are successful and fearless, it's sometimes can be conflicting for some people because they think, well, why do I as a Christian have to obey God when the same person seemingly is confident and look at what's happening with them and stuff? So what would you guys say to somebody who would ask that? Like, why choose the path of God that's harder, comes with a lot of restrictions? Because God asks me not to post those pictures on Instagram. He asks me not to cuss. He asks me not to smoke and drink because my body's a temple. He's asking me all these things, and I kind of like doing those things, you know? And that's the only way to get real confidence. But then I see all these girls, they do all those things, and they look real confident, and they're successful. And, or even this, because I think all of us will eventually get to this point. Why haven't I gotten married yet, and all my friends have? Why haven't I had kids yet when all my friends have? You know, they're not following God, yet they found a man, they got married, and they're starting to have kids, you know, but I'm not. Yet I'm trying to chase to be confident, but how can I be confident in myself when I'm not attaining the thing that I believe I want? But how would you answer someone who asks you whether or not someone can be really confident with God and that's the only way, or is there another way? Can you be confident without God? What do you guys think?
I have a thought there, two-pronged thought. First is the concept of comparison, and second is the concept of delayed gratification. But in terms of comparison, it's really just a matter of, you could compare yourself and look at where their life is now, but then think ahead maybe 10 years, or think ahead maybe 15 years. Where will their life be if they continue down this path? Statistically speaking, people who put their stock in themselves and in everything they know, or put their stock into anything that's on this earth, really, eventually that thing is going to fail you. But God will never fail you. And so when you trust God versus trusting the thing that is right in front of you, then you have more longevity here on earth, but also in eternity. Secondly, the concept of delayed gratification. It's super easy to do the easy things now that feel good, that look good, that taste good, all these different things, but it's just like working out and eating poorly. If you work out but you don't eat correctly, then you're never going to see result. And if you're working out, you're probably not going to see results in the first week, first couple weeks. It's going to take like a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then by the year mark is when you probably start seeing some actual transformation, and then you have to sustain that. Essentially, the point is that to actually feel good, you have to put in work. So everything that feels good in the moment, you're gonna have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And 9 times out of 10, there's a side effect. There's something that just drag you deeper and deeper down, be it the concept of shame or actual physical challenges. Like, for example, if drinking is your vice, then you're gonna have issues with your liver or issues with all these different things. So just from a practical perspective, God puts it in a way that, yeah, it's gonna be hard today, but in the long run, you're gonna be sustained, versus having fun today and then struggling 10 years from now, or literally next week.
Yeah, there's something that reminds me of a couple of years ago when I was younger. You know, Miley Cyrus has a brother named Brazen, and I did a photo shoot with him. We spent probably 2 hours talking about God versus the hour that we spent doing a photo shoot. But it was interesting because they grew up Christian. He grew up in a loving home, and we're talking about Christianity in our faith, or in my faith, because I think he was agnostic or something like that. But it was in that conversation that I learned this one thing that turned my perspective from God in a different way. I grew up in a broken home. I grew up with a lot of abuse. I grew up seeking love and craving love and wanting love, right? So my relationship with God came from this desire also to want to be loved, because God is love, right? So obviously someone that lack love is going to go to the source of love, right? But when I was talking to him, I had this perception that people need God, okay? Because I needed God, because I grew up broken. I grew up without love. So I needed love. I needed God. But talking to Brazen, he didn't need God because he came from a loving home. He came from a loving family. He had the support. He had all that, right? And so that bewildered me, because here I'm trying to sell him God because I think he needs it, but he's convinced that he doesn't need it because he has that love. So I'm like, well, shoot, if you don't need God's love, then why would you need God, right? But then I realized that people don't need God because they need love necessarily. They need God because they're broken sinners. We don't need God because we need confidence. Because yes, the world has confidence. The world has love. The world has a version of God's power, but it doesn't need God because they need confidence, or because they need love, or because they're lonely. You need God because you are a sinner, broken apart from his connection. Your relationship with God is fractured because of our sin. But I thought that was interesting perspective. Okay, but anyway, the point is that we can't think that people are always going to be as in need that we are, and that's what brought us to Christ. We have to expect that some people are so content with what they have, but that's not the reason that brings people to God. The Bible does say it's the goodness of God that brings man to salvation, right? But we are in need of a savior because we are lost without one. And that is the sole reason. You could be the happiest person on the planet. You can be loved. You can be married. You can have babies. You can have a family that loves you. You can have a good job. You can be healthy. Everything can be going right, but you still need God. And you don't need God because you need anything better about your life. You need God because without God, you are going to be without him in the afterlife. I think that's a good reminder because sometimes people try to treat God like a genie. Like, I'll get close to God and then he'll fix everything, you know? And that's actually not the truth. Sometimes things get worse. Moving on to the second question. What habits, mindsets, or relationships would need to shift if you stopped chasing approval and started living from confidence?
I think for me, more than anything, would be like habits. I think that what you said, when we're Christians, we want to be excellent for Christ, because everything we do, even at work, I'm doing it because it's my job, they pay me to, but it's because it's like we're a reflection of Christ. And I feel like I caught myself lately not showing up 100% because I'm lazy or because I see other people and I'm like, they're doing half the work that I'm doing and they're being successful, and I'm stuck in that mindset, or this person isn't this and that. I'm comparing to other people and forgetting why I'm doing it and why I'm trying to do my best. And so I feel like for me that would be the biggest mind shift that I would need to make, and it's hard to make.
So like axing comparison. What percentage would you say of comparison do you guys do throughout your day? Realistically.
I don't like comparing. I don't believe that.
Yeah. What would you guys say?
90%.
How much?
90.
90%.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
Thank you for being
Here
on.
and I was like, I need a bigger apartment. This is nice.
So maybe what we have to talk about is a shift of perspective. Stop comparing, start being inspired. And I think that the best way to do that, though, because one of the things I trained my mind to do when I was younger is to start praising people more. You won't build a habit of comparing yourself to other people, which subsequently leads to enviness, if you praise them and if you're happy for them. And if you vocalize, there's these TikToks that I'm sure you guys have seen, and I am bothered by them so much. Most of them are women. I'm not saying it has anything to do with it. These women have gone on TikTok to say, my friend doesn't like my post at all. I post and they never comment or like. They're not my real friends. Okay, I've seen like 5 of these posts. And I think about that and I'm like, I don't even care. Like, I don't think about what friend of mine has liked my posts and who doesn't and stuff. And the reason is because when you're focused on your business and God's business, you're not mindful of anyone else's business. Obviously, you want support. Everyone wants to be praised. Everyone needs encouragement. But this culture has gotten into the mindset that like you have to be affirmed every second of the day, And realistically, that's just not conducive to a real life, reality and stuff. And we have to get into the habit of being secure in what God's approval is of us. Like, we have to have God's approval first. And a lot of people don't even think about that. They don't think about, would God like my Instagram post? Would Jesus be following me on TikTok? There you go. But realistically, like, would Jesus like your Instagram post? Would he like your stories? Would he like my stories? Would he like my series? Can I be a model? But realistically, like, would he be engaging with our content? And that puts a whole perspective on how we kind of present ourselves to society.
It's not about comparing yourself to anybody, because like I feel like I sound like very cocky. I don't really compare myself to anybody, but then like sometimes I look in the mirror, like no matter how small I am, I've always had a back roll. In November, I got it lipo. I remember the surgeon was like, oh, you should do your stomach. And I was like, I don't want to do my stomach because it's not hard to lose weight. But then I'm like, man, maybe I should do my stomach. I feel like there's always room to look better, but then I know that we're not supposed to do that stuff to our bodies. But you know what I mean?
Well, that's actually a good point to talk about, because in terms of thinking about confidence, we're all in an image-based industry, okay? We all don't want to get old. We all want to be really attractive. I think that's natural, which is what the first part of the first series was, right? Beauty and vanity. But you bring up a good point, like, is getting plastic surgery, does that mean that they're unsatisfied because they're comparing themselves to other people? Could it mean that they just want to enhance their look? And what do you guys think?
When I was little, I used to be, well, just quite frankly, and I'm going to be really blunt, so I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but I was fat, and my friends bullied me for it back in Sweden. It built a complex in me, essentially, that I never wanted to be that. But what it also did was made me think about what I needed to do to be who I wanted to be. And essentially, the way that I went about it is just, it really was as easy as changing my diet and changing my discipline, because I didn't eat well, I didn't work out, I didn't take care of myself. So I feel like at the end of the day, it really just boils down how much work are you willing to put in to make yourself, to be able to combat those thoughts that come in, because I struggled with it for a long time, thinking about, oh, I'm not good enough, and oh, I don't look this, and oh, I don't look that. But then I was like, wait a second, why don't I do that? And when I start to ask myself why, then I was able to be like, oh, it's because I don't actually take care of myself. So now when I feel that way, I'm just like, that doesn't make any sense, because I literally put in the time to be the way I want to be and the way God has created me to be. It's the matter of really honing in on who you are in God and being confident in how He's created you, and also using knowledge that is available to actually shape your life in the way that you want it. Because again, at the end of the day, I mean, it just goes back to what I was talking about earlier, delayed gratification. You can look exactly the way you want if you put in the time and you eat right. You just have to learn what you need to eat, what you want to look like, and you can essentially work to make yourself look like that and sustain it and feel good.
So God gives us free will, and He also gives us our personalities. I think that if someone wanted to get plastic surgery or change their body or do something, I think there's like a line of priority in life. I think everything should first be funneled through giving what you earn first back to God. Like, if you're telling me that you don't give back to God what you made, but you're getting plastic surgery, I would call into question your heart, right? For anybody. I think that if after you are serving or you are giving and you are like walking in obedience with God, but you still just don't like your nose, that's normal. It's not like God's forcing us, like, I gave you that thing and you have to know. Because then if the man was born blind that Jesus healed, right? Should he have stayed healed? Because he, I believe, came up to Jesus and asked to be healed. So does that mean that he should have been okay with being blind because he was born that way? No, he went and got plastic surgery from Jesus, and Jesus healed him, right? He gave him some LASIK eye surgery, right? So I just think that it first has to start with you honoring and chasing God, and it should be the last thing that should be a priority, and it shouldn't be rooted in your identity. I think that you have to be okay almost with it never happening, and I think that's like more of the healthy position to be at when you decide to do it. It's like, look, I would be okay if I didn't do this, but I've already given to God. I'm not going into debt for this, okay? I think that's the other thing. Like, don't borrow money to put yourself in a situation unless, I don't know, that's a whole, it gets really deep when you break everything down, all right? But I think like giving first to God what is God's and being a good steward, because a lot of the convictions I have, and that's kind of why I paused doing music too, is because I'm like, oh my gosh, this time and energy I'm putting into music is not producing anything of substance, but all the time and energy I'm putting into my modeling and photography stuff, I'm making money. So I felt like I was wasting my time putting in my stuff into music when I could be putting that into this. And look what came of this. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very mindful of like what I'm a steward of. I bought a Tesla. God is not like, oh, you bought a Tesla, like, no, it's not like you can't have good things and you can't take care of your body. It's not like you can't buy nice clothes, but it should be the last thing you think about. I bought my Tesla after driving a Honda Civic for 11 years, you know, and I was going to drive that thing until it got to 300,000 miles, but I needed a write-off. So I wrote it off. That's kind of a good point though, because I think a lot of people might wonder about that. Okay, next question is, when you think about eternity, do you feel certain or uncertain about your place in God's kingdom? What emotions does that bring up? Ooh, are you guys going to heaven? I am. Who's coming with me? That's right. Why?
I'm not really afraid of putting myself out there. I'm fearless. I used to be fear, but now I'm fearless.
You know what's a good habit to get in? Being prepared for someone to ask you, hey, when you die, where are you going to go? Heaven. Why? You need to know that answer. Because if you don't know the answer, you ain't going to heaven. Do you know that answer? Why are you going to heaven? Just because you can be deluded too, you know, like, oh, I'm going to heaven. Why? Why are you going to heaven? It's not just knowing you're going to heaven because John says you have the assurance. You have the assurance for a specific reason. And it's because those who are going to heaven have put their faith in Jesus Christ. So the right answer to that question, hey, where are you going to go when you die? I'm going to heaven. Why? Because I put my faith in Jesus Christ. That's why. Some people might press further. Well, it doesn't look like it by the way that you live your life. Because I saw what you posted on Instagram the other day. You were blowing that smoke on your story. You were at that club doing that thing. I saw you. So you say that you're Jesus's, but I can't really tell. That's gonna be real, especially in this industry, because that's what everyone else does, you know, and we have to remind ourselves that God calls us to be set apart from the world. We are called to be holy. And it doesn't mean that we cannot be successful in this business, which is the whole point of this series. It's just that we are going to lead differently, right? Because right now I could be doing what the world does, going to a party and doing other things, but I'm here with you guys. Or I'm doing the model meetups. But honestly, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, look at what I've decided to do in my life. People always say, you got to network, you got to network. I've never liked drinking or smoking. I've never liked club life because all the girls wear heels and I look like a dwarf. So I'm like, I'm not subjecting myself to that. But then, like, okay, you're disengaged now because how else do you connect with people in the business? Well, social media was one, but then I gained a following on social media and like, let me create the reason that people network. So then I did the model meetup, do the model mixers, I'm doing the Bible studies, I invite people to church. I'm creating the reason why people network. So I've controlled that particular area in life, and now I don't have to do it the world's way, I do it my way. And I do it in a way that honors God and makes people feel comfortable and allows for real conversations and stuff. The fourth question, how much of your confidence is dependent on external affirmation versus internal assurance? Okay, what do you think, Kay?
I don't know. I think like Instagram is kind of like my vice. So I get like, it's kind of addicting when you get affirmation on there. Like when you see how many like people like slide up in your DMs and like all your pictures and your stories. And I think a lot of that is kind of, it can be kind of an addicting process. And so I think a lot of it, when I spend a lot of time like on my Instagram, it's like an addicting thing where you're just, you know, seeking affirmation and constantly getting validated, even on like dating apps sometimes too. Like that's kind of a big thing in our generation. And so taking a break from that sometimes helps me step outside of that.
That actually brings up a good point that I want to ask you guys. How do you balance this addiction of social media and not allowing it to consume your mind and putting God first? Like, I think all of us to a certain extent wrestle with that, but I'm curious to see what strategies you guys have implemented to not let it overtake your guys' mind without running away, because I think that's, you've done it like a million times. She's on Instagram, she's off Instagram, she's on Instagram. Like, without necessarily just deactivating it and just running from it. But how do you coexist with that being just a part of your life and just having control over it?
This year, I saw a pastor that put a challenge out at the end of last year that if you don't read your Bible and pray, you can't open social media. So I started doing that. And sometimes I read my Bible and pray so I could. And there have been days where I'm like, I either woke up late or I'm in a rush or have a super early morning meeting and it would require me to get up at 4 a.m. to read and pray. So I do a quick prayer in the morning, but as like, it is in my prayer Bible reading time. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that when I get home later, but I can't open social media. Like I can't open Facebook or Instagram. And those days I found myself picking up my phone to open it. And I'm like, oh, don't open it.
Yeah.
And I found it to be really like a good balance.
Yeah, because then it makes your Instagram experience a lot different.
Yeah.
Because you pray and then you go on Instagram and you look at the explore page and you see that thing that's going to make you compare. It's going to make you stumble.
If I go on Instagram and like I didn't pray or read, like I go in with no armor.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other tactics?
I think as a content creator, it's really difficult to do that because you literally have to be on social media. So I think one thing that's helped me is like scheduling posts. Whenever I, have to collab with anyone or post any of my shoots, like I kind of schedule it and then do what's called a self week. I haven't done it in a while, but there've been some times where I just delete the app off my phone. I delete it, I delete it, and I just don't touch it. And I let anyone that needs to get in contact with me, like, my friends or family, I'll be like, hey, text me, I'm going to be off social media. And so like first couple of days are really hard because you're so used to it, but then at the end of the week you almost don't even want to log in because you realize how much of it takes over your life. So I think doing like a reset like that really does help me.
So I kind of used to care a lot more. Like if I didn't get that many likes or anything on a post, I had to do a mind shift, like a mindset shift to where it's like, okay, well, I like this. And so that's all that matters. There's still some times when I'm like, oh, people didn't like this as much as I thought they would. But then I just try to release it and just find something that's more important than, that validation. That's really helped, I think, for me to just not worry so much about like what I'm posting specifically for validation and affirmations and stuff. And so I can just post what I enjoy. And if people like that, then it's, not everything is for them or for other people.
Yeah, I think it's an addiction for me as well. Because I'm not just a content creator, but I'm also like a social media marketing expert. So the data, I'm like data obsessed. And I look at data to see how something's performing, to see how I can replicate it. And I'm a data junkie, right? I think I'm still learning to balance the consumption of social media in my life. I do think though that one of the things that I would encourage is not taking social media personally, because I think that's what I'm thankful for, is that like, and it's normal, you guys, because oh my gosh, I've seen it from when social media first became a thing in like the early 2010s, when influencers became a term, you know, and I first blew up because I was doing photo shoots of like these MagCon influencers, and they were blowing up. You know what that is? When I took pictures of Cameron Dallas and he posted them and it went viral, and my Instagram blew up in like 2014, and that was a rush. That was an addiction. That experience, fame is not normal, is what I kind of learned over like the years. But it's a phenomenon because it happened to some of my clients who I manage their TikToks, is like the weirdness of the self-importance you feel when you like blow up and stuff, and like you kind of feel some type of way in a sense of yourself and whatnot. But don't take social media personally. Don't make it about yourself, because you might blow up, you know? And I think that something I learned too is people who become famous or get a taste of that fame, it doesn't change who you are, it magnifies who you already were. So if you become a messed up person or arrogant and cocky, that's who you always were. Fame doesn't change people, it changes the people around them, but it just pulls out who you really are. And when you don't take it personally and you don't make it about yourself and your glory, you just make it about the product, just like any other business. Product's doing well, it's getting attention, it's getting what it is, but you separate it and you live a normal life. You have like down-to-earth friends. I think it's easier to separate yourself from the glory that you kind of feel like is yours when a post or something does well. But yeah, it's an ongoing struggle even for me, because it's my job. I wake up and I have like 4 accounts that I have like to do stuff on. And then like, it's also different when people crave your attention. Review me. So, you know, it's a balance I'm learning and stuff. I'm going to ask a more specific question. What is a risk in your guys' life that you have yet to take that you want to?
Modeling.
Modeling?
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Commercial modeling.
Commercial modeling. Acting? Okay.
Probably get more into acting.
I think maybe just being more of like getting more into the kind of like taking it a little bit more seriously. You know, like travel influencer, that kind of thing.
I was gonna say quitting my job, but
Wait, why not quitting your job? Wouldn't that be a risk you're afraid of taking?
because of the money.
What about it?
Just the economy right now.
But you're wanting to take the risk assumingly because you're not happy at your job, right?
I work at an investment firm, and right now one of the executives at my job got caught for basically insider trading. It was on the news, and so everybody's scared what's gonna happen. Part of me is like, I should leave before this gets bad, but then a part of me is like, but the economy's so bad.
So like jumping ship before it sinks.
It's a dumpster fire right now.
That's a good point. You should find another place before you jump ship. But no, that's a valuable risk though. I mean, that is a real risk. That's like, do I quit my job or do I wait to get fired and still end up in the same situation?
My whole life has been God got me. It doesn't matter what happens, everything happens for a reason, and just keep going. Even if you quit, get fired, it's for your well-being, your highest good. So if you just go with that mentality, I feel like whatever's next for you, it's still going to be for you.
Right.
I guess my risk that kind of touches on every aspect of my life would be I'm afraid of being vulnerable.
Look at you taking the first step right now.
I know. I mean, there's moments, but you know, there's a lot of times when I really hold it back because of the pain.
Why are you afraid of being vulnerable? Like past experiences of people hurting you when you were vulnerable?
Yeah.
That's a real risk. The beauty about the love story of God is that, you know, God is vulnerable with us all the time and we disappoint him all the time. Yeah, that's a good thing to unpack later on when we get to relationships, because I have a story for y'all. The thing that I would say the most recent is this for me. Doing the Bible study was a risk that I was hesitant to take, because for me, it's uncertain. You know, you don't know who's going to show up. Actually, you know what I was thinking about today on the drive over here? I'm like, why do I feel reluctant to do this? It was because I didn't want to disappoint God. I already knew I'm going to show up even if no one's here, then I'll just set up the mic or the thing and just do the recording and whatever. Like, to me, it wasn't about who shows up. It'd be nice to have support, you know, like it's not fun to do this on your own and set up everything and I'm just like a one-man show. But it was really like, I don't want to disappoint God because I respect what this is. You know, I'm a messenger on behalf of God, and ensuring that I am delivering his word, what he has to say, without me getting in the way is very important to me, because I respect and honor him in that so much. And so there is the fear of like, am I qualified to be here? Am I qualified to this? Because I know sure, you can look at everything else that I've done. Oh, he teaches on TikTok, he hosts all these things, but this is another thing. This is like having a platform and talking on God. I feel like that's a calling, and it's like I just have so much respect for someone that does this that I'm just like, oh my gosh, all right, let me prepare this message and do all these things, but am I good enough? So I would say that even this was a risk for me. But like, there's 3 people that were up here before you guys came, and they're like, what are you doing up here? I'm like, a Bible study. They're like, oh, what are you talking on? I'm like, confidence, and I'm a photographer and I work with models, so that's what we're talking about, how to succeed in modeling from a biblical perspective and stuff. And, but I have so much going on with everything that I've been doing. And I told him, like, look, I'm just obeying God. At the end of the day, I'm just following and obeying God. Because would I rather be sleeping right now? I'm tired. Yes, it's true. Do I think that there are more qualified people to be doing what I'm doing? Yes. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's taking a risk because God asked me to step out. And so it's trusting that God put me here for a reason. And last week he did, because y'all saw Will, who was up here. And that was a really cool, if you guys weren't here last week, there was a guy up here who was watching the sunset, and then we absorbed him into the Bible study, and he ended up getting a light and like lit me perfectly for the video, which ended up being necessary, and stuck around, hang out, got plugged with him. But like, I already know, like, okay, God, I got to obey you because you're going to do the thing. Because there's stories and things that people needed to hear and say and do that are going to make the impact. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh, and sometimes you just got to step in faith and do the thing that requires a risk, because the reward is going to be that much more amazing. So thank you guys for coming.